Well, hello, Amanda. It's really beautiful to see you in person. We had a chance to talk on the phone after our mutual friend connected us. I loved our conversation. And, as soon as she told me about you and connected us, I, of course, went to your website, of course, went to and listened to one of your podcasts and wanted to get to know you through that work. And I felt immediately connected to your about section on your website. Everything you talk about that you're into and that you spend your time doing are things that I love. And then after we spoke, I felt such a kindred connection to you. So thank you so much for coming on to the Everyday Mystic.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to be in conversation with you today.
You too. So we're going to talk today and go deep on the work you do and your personal experience with connecting to spirit through the body and connecting to your version of God. And we'll talk about what that is and talk about how profound it is to make those spiritual connections through the body. Because I think a lot of people think, well, spirit is separate from body, right? We've got mind, body, and spirit. And people love to disconnect things, don't they? In life, it's like we've got these three things, and then this is one thing, and this is the other, and that's the other thing. But really, it's all one, right? It's all this integrated mix, and we can look at the distinctions between body, mind, and spirit. But really, they all work so beautifully together. And the more that they are working together and integrated, certainly the more access we have to all of it, to all the wisdom in all of those places. So I'm excited for our conversations because you call yourself a brain geek, right? Because you're super into neuroscience. So you've got the mind part. And then you are a dancer, have been a dancer your whole life and have been connected to body work modalities. And so you're connected into the wisdom of the body. And then also, we're going to bring in this piece about how you connect to spirit. So let's first go in and talk a little bit about your own journey, because I know people do not get into this work unless they've had some of their own profound experiences with whether we call it the mystical or the spiritual or the esoteric. So tell us a little bit about your journey, and have you always been a spiritual person, or was there a specific awakening that happened in your life?
I'm so excited to be here talking about spirit. My brand is called Science and Magic, and there's a lot of pings I have from people who are interested in talking about science, which is so encouraging. And I think I have a really approachable way of talking about science, which is why people are interested. But magic is the other component of that. And I say magic is the unknown, the unseen realm, the parts that we don't know, which to me is a huge part of the human experience. And so to dive into spirituality and God and the divine and work language around that feels like such a nourishing conversation. So I'm really excited. I grew up in a very traditional Lutheran Christian upbringing. And this is when I first remember experiencing God or a higher power. And specifically, I went to summer Bible camp. And I have these gorgeous memories of being in worship with the other camp attendees and the counselors and feeling free and being by the lake and under the trees and singing songs. And I really had this feeling of connection as a young girl. Like I would get goosebumps all over my skin. I would feel like my heart would just be expanded. I would even be drawn to tears sometimes in these songs. And that's what first connected me and linked me to spirit in many ways. And that involvement with the church continued, through junior high, through high school, and worship services and Bible groups and Bible studies and Sunday church services, and really more in a religious framework. And once I got into college, and as college does, it expands your mind into other viewpoints and other ways that the world is beyond your familial upbringing. And I did quite a bit of traveling and talking to people from different backgrounds and learning, and started to really question the Christian dogma of, is this the only way? Like, is this the only way towards this beautiful spirit that I'm sensing? And that questioning was hard. I mean, that was like the framework for which I lived my whole life. I mean, I really loved my involvement in the church. It wasn't a side piece to like my life. It was the heart of my life. And to question that, there's a lot of feelings that came up, but it was a sense of taking a belief system that was passed to me from my family and reformulating in a way that made sense to me. And so in college, I did a lot of exploration with movement and dance and a lot of healing through choreography. And that's when I also studied neuroscience. I never lost spirit. So it was never a question of, is this higher power? Is this feeling that gives me goosebumps? Is this connection to something bigger there? It was more of like, does it exist in this soul framework that a lot of Christian churches pass on as, being, you must find it through this vessel. Mm-hmm. And I started to experience that feeling on stage or in dance practices. In connection with others and in connection with my body. And that was a beautiful experience of like God, the divine spirit is in the body. Like I can feel this connection through body. And after college is when I started getting into my yoga practice and diving into that. Now I've been a practitioner for about 10 years. And I also offer yoga as an offering for my services. I guide people through that, but that, has its own framework and roots that is spirituality meets embodiment. Mm-hmm. And found that became in many ways my way of, worship in a way of connecting, of remembering that I'm a part of something greater. I mean, yoga is to yoke, it's to become one. And there's this connection of as I connect into my body, I feel a connection into the community in a bigger way. And from there, I started to get really interested in earth-centered wisdom. Like I noticed that the seasons have a big effect on how I am in my body. And I think astrology has made a huge comeback. And so a lot of people are getting into astrology in a big way, but starting to pay attention to the moon cycles and the seasons, and honestly getting into, earth-centered pagan traditions and just being really intrigued by what they have to offer, like winter solstice, the darkest day of the year. What does that mean seasonally in a magic way? And then summer solstice, the lightest day of the year. And there's so many earth-centered celebrations by cultures all around the world, and learning about those was unpacking a lot as far as my relationship and conditioning around magic and paganism and how it relates to the Christian church, and this fear of being deemed a witch, and really stepping into that in a way that's like, this is where the goddess lives, is in the earth. This is the divine feminine, is earth embodiment. And there's been so much teaching for me around mirroring how earth is. It's both intuitive, it lives in me, and then learning, primarily I've been really into understanding my Irish lineage and understanding kind of like Celtic wisdom and things like that. But there's so many juicy traditions that can teach us so much about just how to be human and connect to the energy that flows through nature. And we are nature. So it makes a lot of sense. So in some ways I say I'm a Christian witch because I'm Christian by culture. I really honor the earth cycles. I really am an explorer of the way that the divine feminine, the goddess, embodies ourselves, our lives. And we can talk more about that, but that's kind of a long-winded answer of my journey and where I'm at. And it's going to be just a constant unraveling and a constant learning. And it's one of my greatest joys of being here on this earth, is exploring the unseen and the mystery.
Yeah, the mystery, I think what is so fascinating about everything you just shared is that there's mystery in all of it. right? I mean, even the most solid systems of understanding, Christianity being as old as it is, we can look further back and go, oh no, there's much older traditions and older firmaments that may at one time have seemed so solid. Like, no, this is it. This is it. And actually, no, there's mystery in all of it. It ancient and modern, continuing to keep really what I think is at the basis of science anyway, as our kind of most modern analysis of what's going on here in the world, that there's always questioning, right? There's this deep questioning that's inherent, I think, to good science, of where you would continue to question and test and question and test, and then other people test the same thing and continue to that cycle, right? And within spiritual traditions, and I think certain ancient ones that I'm familiar with, more of that questioning of, that understanding that we can only see and experience what we see and experience. And then when something new comes in, if we're not open to accepting that, we are closed off to whatever unfolding is going to happen from that mystery. So I love that you continue to explore. And I think that's what makes certainly a mystic, is to continue to explore everything that's out there, what you are personally are experiencing and taking in, and figuring it out through your own lens and through your own set of experiences. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's so beautiful. Your experience as a dancer and then going into yoga and moving spirit through your body, how did that inform, or did it inform your work very specifically? I know you mentioned that you offer yoga, some guidance, but you do a lot of other coaching for high achievers and folks that are type A's, I would classify them as. So how do you bring in movement and embodiment into that work?
My framework is always is a strong word, is most likely in any situation about being from the body. How we connect into the body might, parallel to how we connect into life. And so the thing too about the nervous system is we think of usually just the brain. We're like, okay, well, the brain is in the skull and we're mental and this is where everything happens. But actually we have a spinal cord, which goes all the way down the back. And we have all these nerves that branch out from the spinal cord and innervate our muscles and organs and bones and skin. So the nervous system is the body. And step one for me with my clients is helping them to understand that, yes, we are more than our bodies in so many ways. We are spirits, we are energy, we are consciousness, but we're also in these bodies that have a nervous system that has helped us evolve to keep our physical body out of danger. And that's what's helped us evolve as a species. And so by understanding how the nervous system works and applying it to everyday life and understanding signals, that's step one. So using embodiment like yoga, like meditation, like breath, like different postures or somatic techniques can just help to soothe the nervous system. And it's very difficult to connect to something bigger and feel that feeling of oneness if you're in a state of survival. Because, like, just on a base level, if you were running from a wild animal in the woods, you might drop down to your knees and pray if you're at your wit's end and that's like it. But like, if there's other options for how to get out of there, if there's a path to run to or a tree to climb up or a cave to go into, you're strategizing how to keep your earth body safe. So step one is to move out of a state of survival. And then once we work with that, and that can take some time because, it's multi-layered and depends on the person and the trauma and the patterning of their lives and how their body works. Then there can be a deeper or a different sort of listening of, okay, can I drop down into my heart And my heart has its own nervous system. And what is my heart saying to me? Okay, this flash of information came in. That's intuition. Or I can drop down into my gut and feel an instinct. My gut feels like this, or I see this color or this vision. Or you can start to access different, my shoulder's starting to ache right now. Okay, what's this telling me about can I be with that? And how am I responding to that shoulder aching? Am I trying to get it to go away, or am I sitting with it in kindness? And how does that mirror how I interact with others in my life? And so I often have my clients do a yoga practice or a movement practice or something in the body, a body scan, and then reflect upon what that was like for them. And we talk about it. And oh my goodness, the wisdom that comes from those conversations is just, it's amazing. I find that we have so much information in our society right now of like learn, podcast, listen, write down notes, but to actually sit down and spend time with your greatest teacher, the body, because in your own heart and in your own cells lies your connection to spirit, which is different than anyone else's. Your way of connecting to the world is in your neural pathways. That's the juice, that's the treasure. And so my whole framework and whole technique is to carve out space and give motivation and structure around people connecting to their bodies and thus perhaps connecting to something bigger, and maybe not. Some of my clients are into that, some aren't. But I do love it when that sort of conversation and that mystery comes in, and you would be surprised. I have, a handful of scientists who all they want to talk about is magic and spirituality because it's a space to do it. And I can hold both spaces for both of them. It's not a separate thing,
Well, they're so very connected, right? I mean, think of the magic as you analyze something scientifically, or even if you look at a brain scan. I mean, it looks, as you learn about these and explore science, really what you are is exploring the magic of the universe. Right? You can imagine what people thought of when they first discovered atoms and started seeing things that weren't there, or even just like looking into a microscope for the very first time and seeing something that like, holy shit, what is that? That's not what I'm seeing with my eyes. And so I think there is an inherent certainly curiosity, but also an inherent sense of exploration and unraveling mystery with scientists. So it makes sense to me that they would also be into this, that I think probably the purer scientists are probably really into it, which is cool. I'm glad those are the ones that are attracted to working with you. That makes total sense. Now, when it comes to embodiment, and this is so true of most, I think, people who are professionals, just living within modern American society, where we are so very stressed, so very overworked, or maybe just not working in the right way. Because I know you and I relate and agree on this. It's like when you're doing the work you love, you can spend just hours and hours and hours upon hours doing that thing because it's filling you at the same time. But for those that are quote unquote overworked, meaning they're draining out their energy to the work rather than getting filled back from it, stressed, juggling many different things, and then and even not without the network of support systems that they might have had through kinship networks and community that they may have had in the past. We've got a bundle of stress, a bundle of people who then become very disembodied, don't they? It's so much going on and their nervous systems are so racked that they end up leaving their body and spending a lot of time either dissociated or disembodied. Do you find that the clients that are coming to you are often in that state of where they're not even in touch with their breath or how they're feeling inside?
It's interesting because there are those two archetypes of the one who's not getting filled up from their work and they're just drained and kind of on that hamster wheel. And there is that other archetype of the client who loves their work so much and they're so filled by it. But I find that that client also can lose touch of their body.
Mm.
And it's not in a way where this work is taking my energy, but it's like, I'm so in love with this and I'm in such a flow that I'm forgetting that I'm in a body with a nervous system that needs breaks.
Mm.
And that archetype tends to reach out to me more often. So it tends to be the client who's passionate about what they do and they want to create more vibrancy and they want to create more embodiment around their work and recognize to some extent that they need some sort of accountability and structure and guidance and motivation to understand that bringing their body to work with them doesn't take anything away from their beloved work, because that's the fear. Like if I step away, my work's going to suffer and I love my work so much. And sometimes they just want a bit more. So they might already have like some sort of exercise routine, or they might meditate already, but they want juicier. They want more delicious. They want more embodied. They want that spiritual component maybe. There's something extra that's missing, like the frosting on the cake.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the sweet spot of where I work. And I do work with more of the archetype who's kind of stuck in a position that they don't want. But I find that that's a different energy, because the job that they have, there's stuff you can do 100%. Like I can, work around that, but being stuck in a job you want, that's a different sort of energy than work, being fed by your work and being burned out, if that makes sense. And different brains.
Absolutely right. Different part of the same spectrum of where you've got people who are in that place of, well, both their inner and their outer life suck. But if, one's got the outer life maybe a little worked out more and like, this is cool. Okay, great. Now we're going to go in and work on that inner life a bit. And we're all at different stages and places. And I feel like we also move in and out of those places of when our inner and outer lives are shining and thriving in the most best possible ways. And ultimately we're aligning those two things, right? To where our inner world, our inner life is so beautiful, magical, vibrant, and expressing out into the outer life. And right. And then we just get into this beautiful cycle of all of that. Yeah. So what advice would you give to somebody who, let's take that person who is a bit more, both the inner and they're disconnected from the inner life, their outer life is sucking. What kind of first step and piece of advice would you give to a person like that who's just maybe getting started on this path?
Find something that feels good. And that's going to take some upfront investment of doing things you maybe don't like. And so when I say that, not every yoga class is for everybody. And yoga is not even for everybody. Meditation's not even for everybody. Certainly the benefits are immense, but I find that every single person resonates with a different way to connect to their body. Some love dance, some love to exercise, some love to go on walks, some love to be in nature and explore. Pay attention to how you feel as you're doing it. And when something works, stick with it and make it a priority and do it, because what that is doing is that's bringing your system into a state of balance. And the more you find that balance, the more that time will start to expand, your experience of time, and your hormones will start to be more regulated, and you'll be more centered and more in your body. And then the next breadcrumb will start to unravel. But just find something and just do it. I think choice fatigue is a real thing. It's like, well, where do I even start? Where do I go? I feel choice fatigued all the time, like, especially in the online world. And so, reach out to a friend and say, can I go to this thing with you, and just start trying, and know that it takes a little bit of upfront pushing yourself to do it. It takes shifting behavior, but find a way to feel good.
And I love what you said about actually paying attention to why it feels good, or what about this feels good. That analysis itself is gold, because so many people I think are, oh yeah, this thing feels good, but I don't know. They're not necessarily thinking about why. And when you start to think and then question yourself and analyze yourself, you begin to find, oh, okay, well, this thing feels good for these reasons. So maybe I can create those good feelings in this other thing. Now that I've analyzed, what it is that actually feels good about this, maybe I can find that in something that's a little healthier than that thing that maybe you're doing, or, whatever. So it's that self-analysis, the self-awareness piece of really listening to the body. That is such a valuable tool of getting started, from what I heard from you. So from there, someone's, tuning in, they're getting closer. And, for those that you mentioned, you've got some of your clients that are actually tapping into source, the divine, God, and into their spirit, their spiritual centers are really waking up in this embodiment work. What does that look like for clients that you've worked with, or even for yourself?
Before I answer that too, I want to give one more. This just popped in. I think it's really important. A lot of people's nervous systems are really heightened and activated. And so it can be really difficult to go from an extra activated nervous system into a closed eyes meditative state. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And so that's why you see a lot of type A workaholics, high achievers do really hardcore activities like CrossFit or running, long distances, or cycling or biking. That's actually a strategy to discharge extra energy. But what I would say for that archetype, and this is a lot of our society is very high achieving in general, after that, add on something grounding. So that's a really simple thing that you can do. Like, if you already have a practice that feels good, if you go on your morning run and you sprint at the very end, an easy add-on would be to find a meditation and try it after that. Because in the middle of the day or at the end of a day, if you don't discharge that extra energy, it's going to be really hard to access that higher state.
Oh, that's such great advice. So do the thing that you already know how to do that discharges the energy and regulates your nervous system, and then try the woo-woo thing. That's
100%. And so then what I notice, so the nervous system starts to get regulated, and then there starts to kind of emerge this calmer, like, not so hot-tempered or reactive or annoyed by people or irritable. There starts to be more of a hope, I would say, or a curiosity, or a feeling of connection to a greater purpose of sorts, or an interest in just like, who am I in relationship to what I'm doing, and this value of self. And the conversations start to shift to be more whole. And we may not talk specifically about God or the divine, though I offer that to all of my clients to dive into the mystery. But there starts to be a bigger picture lens through which we approach our sessions, rather than smaller worries or focus on smaller agitations. Those fade into the background and don't become such a big deal. And there's bigger picture perspective brought in, which is so beautiful. And often, like, I have my clients write in a journal if they want to, and I can kind of track their journal and see how they're doing with the different exercises. They might start to say, like, okay, an emotion came up here, and emotions start to arise from the body because it feels safe enough to be seen to some degree by themselves. And then if they feel comfortable, to bring it to me, and things start to process. There becomes more depth, more expansion. And from there, all sorts of conversations can come through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the feelings, tapping into the emotions that maybe aren't on the surface for someone, as those start to come up and release. And we're going to get back to that other question that I had for you, but I really want to stick with this for a sec. So when those emotions come up and let's say release, or at least get acknowledged, do you see changes happen in people's bodies? Are they freeing? Is chronic pain and irritation or headaches or even just any, things that are physical manifestations of dis-ease and their, what I would consider their emotional states being, not being addressed? Like, do you see physical changes in people?
The most common thing I see is a softening. Because when you're so charged into your immediate activation of the moment, you're kind of clenched up and in, and the shoulders come up and the jaw grits down and the brow furrows and the stomach is tight and the voice resonance is up a little bit and the breath is shallow. And as we do this work, there's a settling down and out. And there's a softening of tissues as there's more ease. And there's, like the eyes have more vitality, and there's more relaxation in the face, and there's deeper breath. So all of those things I definitely see. And I mean, changes, yes, physically, but also externally in lives, shifts in relationships, shifts in careers. They'll become aha moments. That's just like, this is for me. This isn't for me. There's big transitions that come from within, and there's an immense amount of confidence in those decisions that aren't even suggested by me, but supported by me because they come from within, from that softness. If there's a hardness and a firmness and a container around our inner wisdom, it doesn't have space to peek itself out. But when the tissue can release and be like, there's not a wild animal chasing me. There's not a threat in my environment. I can reside in my body and be okay. I can open my heart up to intuition and my every cell of my being up to wisdom from the divine, from support. I can surrender. Then life ideas just start to stream. And I find that I call it soul. It's like soul aligned.
Yeah.
And external changes happen very quickly.
Yeah, that releasing of the armament to allow the soul to speak and be heard and to express and create and do all the things that it's meant to do here is so beautiful. And I would imagine every single person listening to this would benefit from, whether they worked with you or not, just be getting in touch with their body, getting in a relationship where they can get into that softness. So that's a beautiful thing for people to even just visualize the softening. Visualize your tissues and muscles. You don't have to go and spend tons of money on expensive body work. Like, you could actually just spend some time visualizing the softening of, and using, of course, some breathing techniques and some ways of helping, or yoga techniques. Those things can all be incredible helpers. But I find that once someone makes that decision, I'm ready for this, I want this, I'm going to, and I am, then even just that intention allows it all to happen. The tools are it's almost like the tools become a way to give you this excuse, like, oh yeah, that tool, that external thing made this thing happen. And it's still a sense of giving away your power, but it's like, we need that. We still need that. Our minds need that, I think, in a lot of ways, to be like, oh yeah, this and I'm not saying those tools don't inherently have their own power that they lend to you, for sure. But I really feel like that simply making that decision and someone intending and setting that intention is more, even more powerful than the tools themselves.
And I'd say too, making the decision and then knowing that when you invite softening, that the tightness wants to be seen too. And I find that especially with that high achieving archetype, there's this, well, let's get in to do the thing to like soften tissue already. Why won't you? And it can be incredibly agitating to notice your tightness. And that's why a lot of people avoid it. But I think that the way to softness is by sitting with the tightness and loving it and knowing that it's there for a reason and that it's your body's intelligence in its own way protecting you, and it's beautiful in and of itself. And that's how sensations move, and that's how emotions move, not by needing them to do anything in particular or shaking them off or trying to get them to go away. I mean, easier said than done when things like pain and uncomfortable sensations are present, but rather saying like, hello, I see you. I'm listening to you too.
Mm-hmm.
And then the tightening can maneuver however it needs to, and the softening might emerge. Mm-hmm. So I want to say that for people who are listening, who are like, okay, well, let me envision my softness, but there's all this tightness in the way. And it's making me feel really uncomfortable because it won't go away. Well, the more you want it to go away, the more it tightens.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. And I mean, you're acknowledging it either way, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like we can have negative thoughts and spend our time thinking this negative thing about life or ourselves, or we could think a positive opposite thought about ourselves or about life. We're going to be having the thought anyway. And this is like, you're acknowledging the pain, like, this hurts. It's just like, ooh, I'm acknowledging you, but now I'm giving you love and sending you energy to unfold or like you said, to just give that part, that pain, that feeling, some acknowledgement and some listening.
That's it.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Well, let's get back to that other question that I asked about.
Yeah, sorry.
No, gosh, never be sorry about these beautiful threads. Like, let's go where spirit takes us. And I love that we went there. When it comes to those clients or yourself who have entered into a spiritual union with the divine through their body, let's talk about that. How does that look? And maybe let's start with you. Mm-hmm. Thinking to a time when, a profound time of that happening or your first time of that happening. What was that like to be in a body sensation practice or, in an embodiment type of practice and then opening into the mystery?
What's coming to mind, and I wouldn't say this is the first time that I experienced something like this, but it's such a beautiful representation. I was in a dance class, and it was an improv-based class, and we were partnered with whoever, and I ended up being partnered with the instructor, and one person was intended to blindfold themselves, and the other person was the lead of the experience, and I was blindfolded. And I say that my lead was the instructor because he was very skilled at holding a structure for me that felt very safe. And it must have been 15 minutes, there wasn't music that I remember. We were just asked to surrender to being guided. And I didn't know where I was in the room. I had no visual input. I didn't know what part, like if my arm was on his back or his leg. My feet were lifted up at some times, and I just completely lost my sense of self and just surrendered into the experience and had to broaden my perspective. And I remember feeling so connected through this surrender in this new sensory experience from that moment. Like I took the blindfold off and I felt like, I mean, it's dramatic. I had new eyes or something. Like I just felt that it changed me in a really big way because I had to let go. And there's something about, for me, spiritual union of letting go and trusting that something greater is holding you and that it has your best interest in mind. And it's that it's coded towards love and harmony. And that stands out to me. And other ways I experience the divine through my body, you know, since I've been a little girl, would be that tingling up and down my spine. I'll get goosebumps all over my arms. I'll feel like tears well up, but not from pain, tears of like pure joy. So these are body sensations to me that's like, okay, something bigger is here right now. Like I feel connected. I feel ecstatic. And I know that there's brain scans associated with some of these states that also are part of the body. And there's definitely a path to the divine that's transcending the body. There's spiritual teachings about that. That's for sure a way. And there's also teachings of through the body, that it's through these vessels that we can connect to God. And I think that, you know, we have these physical forms, but there's energy that flows through us. Like quite literally, the nervous system is energy. It transmits energy and a magnetic field around the body. So there's lots of things that are unseen. So it's how is this animating, and how does the energy from the objects and the living things around us influencing us? And there's something, yeah. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that was a specific way, and then different ways that I feel the presence of God, like through my system.
Yeah. And are there ways that you invoke that feeling and invoke the presence of God in the times that you need it?
Yeah, for sure. I think that if I'm having a really hard time, I'm not really an altar person. So if you don't know what an altar is, for those listening, you like set up a sort of sacred space. It can be elevated on a table, it can be on the floor, and you can decorate it with like stones or objects that mean something to you. And you typically light a candle, or you have some sort of delicious scent around it, and it's a portal towards connecting to God. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. There's all different traditions around it. But I don't do that on a daily basis. But if life has like knocked me to my knees and I feel like I need help, I'll generally set up some sort of sacred space for myself, and I will light candles and I will just pray and I'll let go. And it's like this heart-centered, my friend called it, she's a angel Reiki healer, but she called it a cry to the angels. And so that's one way that I feel like I can evoke that sort of sensation. I'll also do something similar in the bath. Like I feel like the bath is really nice because it's not a bath with the lights on. I mean, I'm talking candles. I'll put a flower by the bath, but like I can access that feeling there. And often in a yoga practice at the very end during the resting pose, when you just give up the practice and surrender. So it's associated with these moments of surrender when I feel like that feeling can be evoked if needed. And it typically comes with some sort of like prayer, like I'm open to help now.
Yeah. You mentioned when we first spoke about these letters that you wrote to God as a child. Is that something that, tell the listeners about that? And is that something that you still do?
Oh yeah. And that's more maintenance. So that's something that I do most days. I mean, I did it this morning. Ever since I've always been a writer, and I would just write my prayers down in a journal. And I've done that since I can't even remember. I've just always done it. So it says, Dear God, and that's changed throughout time. It's kind of fun to read. I save all my journals, but I would say Yahweh at one time, Jesus, the divine, dear Goddess. And then I just write and I say, I am so grateful, and I feel my gratitudes and I feel all my gifts that I feel like I've been blessed with in this life. And I think that's really important, rather than just asking for something, to also acknowledge like, wow, like there's so much goodness here. And then I'll often ask for support or for help. Like, will you please, help so-and-so, or will you be with me during this conversation? And then general things like, infuse every cell of my body with vitality today and always. Sometimes I pray for my future self, because maybe in moments where I don't feel so connected, I say, can you find me in those moments when I don't feel you, or I don't have a hard time reaching for you. And it'll typically be like a half a page or a page. But the point is that I'm feeling it as I'm writing. I'm not writing from my head. I'm writing from my heart. And it helps me to focus my prayers. I find that if I kind of do the kneeling by the bedside, the typical structure that we think of with prayer, my mind just kind of but writing for me, it's like, it's so therapeutic. And I don't really read them again. I read my journal entries, which are different, but I can't say that I read my prayers again. I'll skim them.
Right?
Yeah.
They're not for you. Yeah. That's so interesting. And I completely relate to the, my soul's language being through writing quite often. I can be stuck for words and not know what to say, but as soon as there's a pen in my hand, I'll just go, and it's coming through me in so many ways, right?
Yes, it's that feeling for sure. And I do it in the morning too. I find that I feel really connected to God in the mornings. I like to wake up at a fairly early hour and light a candle before the sun comes up and play healing music frequencies and read something that, like, spiritual literature, and then do my journaling. That's when I feel most connected. I find that if I were to try to pull out my prayer journal in the afternoon or something, or even in the evening, I don't have that flow as naturally. So it's definitely a morning routine that I do most days of the week.
So you've said that you're, in these Dear God letters or entries or prayers, that what you called God changed over the years, and looking back on that. So what is your conception now, having studied neuroscience and being a science geek and in learning about, ourselves and our experience here through those lenses, as well as continuing on with your spiritual practices and just having experienced more in life since your first conceptions of what God was to you. What is it to you now, and how has that been informed by the things that you've experienced?
I think it changes. I play around with different kind of archetypes or energies. I think that's what spiritual guides are for. So like an archetype of, people have like goddess cards or angel cards. Like, you can ask Archangel Michael, for example, for support and protection and fierce protection. So maybe I'll ask that archetype, like, will you bring me and my family protection? Or, Jesus still, because Jesus was a big guide to me growing up, and I still think has a particular energy of Christ consciousness and of, opening yourself up to your own inner creator, and has this fierce questioning of like authority and this really personal empowerment. I've really been into working with goddess energy, with the divine feminine. I brought that up in the beginning, but so often I pray, Dear Father, Father God growing up. And now it's Dear Mother, the energy of, this is beside gender, even the energy of openness and flow and expression and creativity in a lot of ways, and giving that some energy, because so much of my life was on more of the masculine centered energy, but really it's all God. And in my professional life, I'll use more words like the divine or the universe, because I think it's a bit more inclusive. Like, people might think God, oh, this bearded man up in the sky, And so I really believe spirituality is so unique to every person, which makes sense. Our brains are all wired differently. We're all different constitutions. But in my personal journal, it morphs depending on what sort of energy I need, with the understanding that it's all one web that we're just connected to. It's one, it's love, it's harmony, it's one force that, can be pinged in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that you mentioned other guides, right? It's not just necessarily God energy or this one entity. It is, there are many paths, many guides, teachers to the divine,
Yeah.
and to that source energy where we might gain whatever it is we need.
Yeah.
Strength, wisdom, love, support, a knowing. So seeing and understanding that there's all these many pathways to that, that sense is beautiful. And I love that you mentioned archangels. And are there other guides that do you have a relationship with your own personal guide as well?
I would say, like I mentioned, Jesus is still a really big guide for me, just because I feel so familiar with his presence. I've really been into learning about Mary Magdalene, because that is the sacred feminine to the masculine, and working with her energy. I feel very connected to fairies. And I think that has to do a lot with the Fae folk of my Irish lineage. But I often feel the presence of fairies. I love that I can talk about this right now. And
yeah, so tell me more about fairies, because and I'm sure listeners have their own, understanding or their own belief in what a fairy is or isn't. So tell me more, based on your lineage too, and the connection with your Celtic roots, what fairies are to you, and how they work in your life.
Well, historically, from what I understand, and I'm still learning about this, but the Fae is an actual living group of beings beyond the other realm. It's not simply what we think of, like the winged little people floating around. It's a population that have crossed over into a realm that have deep wisdom and something to offer in the mystical realm. But the archetype of fairies that I feel as well, in addition to that, is it's a light and playful and almost like, I don't know, tickling energy of just like it's just playful. It's giggling. And I feel them often, in the woods or around flowers or things like that. And I think all these archetypes are really interesting because they give language around feeling too. And so, yeah, I feel that fairy energy, and I also feel angel energy a lot. And angel energy to me feels bright and light and clear in consciousness and so soaked in love. And so fairies have this like more playful, colorful feeling. Like maybe I'll see like little blues or pinks, and it'll just make me giggle. And then angels have this like, oh, I'm being held right now. I'm like so divinely protected and guided and absorbed in like a golden light.
I feel absorbed and protected right now, just having this conversation about it, which I know that, even when we talk about it, it invokes those spirits into the room, into our energetic sphere. So I love that, that we get to end this way, because I hope everybody listening feels enveloped and embraced by the loving arms of your angels, and feels the lightness and the joy of the fairies that that get to, flit around your world. Thank you so much, Amanda, for sharing your story and your wisdom and all of the tips that you've left here for people to actually take in and use, because I know we've got listeners of all types, and some, this information may be completely new to them. Some may be exactly your client, this high energy, high producing kind of person. And I think everyone, no matter where you're at in life, they will gain some wisdom out of this conversation. So where can they go to find more? I would love to guide them to both your website and your podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and asking me these beautiful questions. It feels like we're just on a phone call talking about spirituality. It's wonderful.
Right.
I have a podcast called Science and Magic, and that is aimed towards having conversation around how to work in a more delicious and nourishing way. I also have a YouTube channel called Science and Magic, and when you look it up, you have to say with Amanda Leaveck. So Science and Magic with Amanda Leaveck. But on my YouTube channel, same thing, talking, about how to work more deliciously. I dive a bit more into feminine energy. I really like to get into like vitality and beauty tips on my YouTube channel. And then my website, I actually have a free meditation album available for download called Neurosound, and it's designed to be an interactive tour of your own nervous system. And so there's 5 tracks on there, and it's so good. Like one of them is an endocrine system toning meditation that pairs with each chakra. So it starts with the gland in your body and then works with the energy center. So it's woo and that science-based embodiment at the same time. And the nervous system massage meditation there it has over 25,000 downloads on Insight Timer by people all over the world. So I highly suggest going there if you just want I just want to feel my nervous system and feel my body. And then on my website, you'll see lots of other stuff. I do private coaching. On occasion, I'll have group coaching experiences. And yeah.
Well, what a beautiful gift. Go straight to Amanda's website. I'm going to put the links in the show notes that she shared. What a beautiful gift to leave people with. Thank you so much for your time. And let's get back together for another conversation.
I would love that. Thank you so much.